Tony Robbins has helped more than 1 million couples save their relationships. I paid over $3,500 and absorbed all the advice that I could over a 9-month period. So here are the 5 biggest relationship breakdowns and how to break the cycle. Okay, so this is a thread that I wrote on Twitter that I'm going to be reading here. We're going to go over this together. It's kind of be the gist of how this video works. So let's go through it.
Relationships end not from a lack of love. Most relationships do not end from a lack of love. They end from a lack of polarity. Or another way of saying it is, depolarization is what destroys most relationships. What is depolarization? Well, in my own life, we all have been shaped by our environment. We walk in the world with certain things, then we're shaped. My mother was the most dominant person in my life. I had 4 different fathers, and I love my mother more than anything, and I learned to become a pleaser. Now, gentlemen don't understand this, but ladies, I know you do. Women do not want a pleaser. How many ladies would agree you don't want a pleaser? Make some noise so the men can see if you can put it out there. Shakes always do something out there. But men go, but they say they want to be pleased. I said, yes, they want to be pleased, but they don't want a pleaser. It's confusing to most men, right? But what happens is when you're a pleaser, you lose your center. You'll just do anything to try to make the person happy. You don't actually have your own thought, feeling, strength. And what happens is in a relationship, and it can happen in a heterosexual relationship, a homosexual relationship, a lesbian relationship, it doesn't matter what the sexuality is. If there are 2 women or 2 men even, if there's going to be passion, one has got a stronger masculine, one a more feminine portion of energetically. Talking about intimacy, not every moment of your life. And so when that, in the beginning, there's these sparks, because there's this polarity, opposite energies. But then what happens, let's say you guys go through a problem. You're running a business together, and then there's cash flow problems. Or you have your first child, and the child is sick. Or you're dealing with a mom or a dad that's getting older, and their health is an issue. Or whatever it is, and there's stress, and then both of you respond the same way by getting masculine. Or both of you by becoming more feminine. And what that does is it depolarizes. There's no more electricity anymore.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that 100%. So my dad is, well, my mother rather was a colonel in the Air Force. My dad was the stay-home dad, and so I grew up as him people-pleasing all throughout my childhood. And so when I got married, I did this exact same thing. I put her on a pedestal, and I worshipped everything she did. Everything she did was the correct way. I dared not speak up to her, or as far as I don't agree with this. Let's do it this way. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, we'll do it your way. It was always like kowtowing to her. And that has brought on so much trouble throughout our relationship. She's learned not to trust me. She's learned that she's got to do it herself. I'm sure some of you other people pleasers have heard this. I'm not your mother. Stop putting me in that position. So those are all phrases that I heard all the time, but that was because I had the reverse polarity. We were depolarized. I was more on the masculine than she was. It was a horrible part of the relationship. So learning how to turn that around is like one of the very first steps that we try to do here in our coaching program. But a second thing about people pleasing is no one likes a people pleaser. You navigate the world and you become someone that no one loves, no one hates. That also means you're not that memorable. You tend to go through life like, I'm sorry, who was that kid? I think I remember that person, but I don't, So it's not something that it's really good to go through life in general as that regard. So let's move on to the next one.
Break down. What made you start to lose the attraction? Well, you'll think it's these other things, but really what it is depolarization. And when depolarization happens, now little things annoy you.
Yep.
And so you go to step 2. Let's throw it up there for everybody. It's called irritation, frustration, emotional stacking, and stonewalling. Irritation, frustration, emotional stacking, stonewalling. When you no longer have that energy of attraction that makes everything beautiful and wonderful, you start to think critically about the other person or critically about yourself. But usually the other person is where we start. It's just the typical approach. And so I learned years ago from a relationship expert about what he called the 4 R's. Let me give you the 4 R's that if you use them, they can keep you from having your relationship break down. So the first R is resistance. Jot it down if you would. You're in a relationship, you have all this polarity, this great energy, and then there's a little loss of attraction, there's stressors in other areas of your life, you drop to a lower state, and now in that lower state, you get irritated, you get this little resistance.
quick aside, what he means by state, it's the how your body's feeling. 'Cause sometimes, you'll be in a desperate, depleted mode where you just don't feel like doing anything. But then there's other times where time just flows by, right? So like you're in a flow state. That's a high state. The thoughts that you have are higher quality thoughts. When you're in a down state, you think more negative. You think more like, I can't do this. But in a higher state, like, I could do this. Absolutely, I can do this. So it depends on the state that you're in, determines the quality of thoughts that you're going for. So that's kind of what he's getting at here.
You think, why do they say that? Why do they do it that way? Gosh, I wish we could get ready at a more reasonable period of time, and we got to go. This always happens. In the beginning, it's just a resistance. It's a little tension in your body. So when that resistance shows up, if you don't deal with it, it'll grow to something worse. But if you don't deal with it resistance, it'll grow to the second R, and now you move from resistance to resentment. And resentment starts to get expressed a little differently. Now, it's like you think in your head, why does he tell that same story every time? Or, God, can't she ever get ready on time? She knew what time it was. What in the hell? Now, you don't say anything. This is inside you. But you move beyond resistance to now it's got more energy because you didn't deal with it. Hey, by the way, when should you kill a monster? When it's a baby. But if you don't handle it when it's resentment, okay, it'll go to the third step. I'm sure you've seen this in couples if you've not experienced it, and that's rejection. That's where all of a sudden a partner says to you, why do you always do that? And you're like, always do? I don't always do. What are you talking about? And it feels like it's coming out of nowhere because you didn't tell them anything along the way, and now you built it up to the point where you can't keep it inside, and now you're blaming them. They finally get to the fourth stage, and that's repression. Repression is the couple who've been together 20 years, and they never fight. And when they finally get divorced after 25 years, people go, I can't even believe they got divorced. Like, they never fought. I never even heard them argue. There was nothing there. That's right, there was nothing there. Because they just finally got tired of feeling angry, so they repressed. It's like you go to Starbucks, you'll see this almost any day you go there, there'll be a couple, and they're both on their phone separate from each other the entire time. Or one's reading the paper, and the other's on, and you can feel there's no relationship.
That happens a lot. And so one of the things that he made note of there is rejection and fears. Two of our worst fears that we all share is, one, we're not good enough, and two, we won't be loved. And so at the base of all these things, the reason why some of these conversations that we need to have are scary is because when we bring this up to a partner, we're worried that they're going to reject us and reject who we are at a core. And so that's oftentimes the reason why people don't have the necessary conversations, just because they're too afraid of that rejection that they're going to get from their partner. And it slowly kills you inside if you don't do that. You slowly start to build up resentment if you don't do that, and it's going to tear you apart anyways. Do the hard conversation. It's not worth the resentment and the buildup of it on the back end of that. All right.
Yeah, if you don't, you've got to stop the 4 R's when they happen. If you don't, you'll go to the third step. And this third step is the loss of physical passion. Because you're irritated, you're frustrated.
And we like the physical passion.
And maybe you've stacked your emotions, negative emotions, and now maybe you're stonewalling. You don't even talk to the person. You look away, you look at your phone when they ask you a question, you roll your eyes, you do all those things. There's a man.
Even Jordan Peterson mentioned that is one of the things that you can tell when you're talking to somebody is if they start rolling their eyes, it's like, oh, the relationship is over at this point. If you don't turn it around, it's hard pressed to get over that.
Named Dr. Gottman, if you're interested, who's probably the greatest expert on whether you're going to stay married or not. He has a 91% success rate in watching a couple speak for 15 minutes, a conversation, and he can tell with 91% accuracy if you'll be divorced or not within 5 years. Because he did videotapes for, I don't know how many, I've forgotten how many, like 30,000 hours of couples who were in their hotels, and they literally watched every bit of their conversation until they found these core patterns, like stonewalling, like showing resentment, like rolling your eyes. And so they only lead to destruction because what they lead to is a loss of physical passion. That doesn't mean you have to make love every single day, but there's just not the same connection. And when you no longer have that physical passion, it quickly leads to the fourth one. You've got.
Yeah, that physical passion is honestly what got me started down this journey of healing. It's like we went a year without sex, and I don't know about you, but just going on a week without sex, like after just a week of not having it, I'm all pent up, I'm ready to go. So it was a very depressing time for me, but it was the straw, the thing that I sought the most is like, we haven't had sex in a while. Why the fuck haven't we had sex in such a long time? Let me figure out what's going on. And so that's initially what was hurtful enough and painful enough that started me down this path of understanding what it was. And they said a great quote about that. I can't remember who said it, but if you're not having sex, it's like 80%, 90% of everything you think about. But when you are having sex, sex is only 5% of what you're thinking about. Everything, the whole world becomes alive when that area is in good working order. And I like to think of sex as a good metric to how healthy the relationship is. All right, that's the next one.
Commitment. Now you're not even committed to giving.
Let's go backwards.
You feel a loss of commitment. Now you're not even committed to giving them attention or passion because, you know, they irritate you, they frustrate you, there's no attraction, you're not together physically, so what the hell? You no longer seem to be committed. They no longer seem to be committed to you, and that will eventually lead to the worst one. You feel a loss of.
Yeah, the lack of commitment, you can feel that, it's just something like, I don't care about this other person. You start really not caring about what they're doing, what they're saying. You just don't really want to have an intimate, good conversations with them.
Well, he's such a jerk. Final step, which is the story of incompatibility. That's when you start making up stories. Well, he's such a jerk. She's such an idiot. You know, she's so selfish. He's so selfish. All of this about him, or her. But you don't point the finger back and look at your part in that process. And once you make up a story, the story you make up becomes the way you live. And now you really separate. Now there's no attraction, and look what happens. It gets worse. More irritation, more frustration, more emotional stacking, more stonewalling, less physical passion, even less commitment, even more storytelling how terrible it is until this relationship ends. Now, some people stay for convenience or economics or the kids, but there's really no relationship. Final step, which is the story of incompatibility. When it's little. So how do you transform this? You catch it when it's little. You do the little things that make your partner feel loved by you. The little things, the littlest things, the little kindnesses, the gentleness, the love, and you find your center. What is your center? Is it more masculine or feminine when you're together intimately? And you don't let things build up, and you change the story. Write down, change your story, change your life. You know, one way I can find out how couples are doing is I'll say, tell me the story of how you met. And you'll learn immediately where they are. Because some couples will say, well, they look at each other and they smile and they go, well, we met here or online or we did this thing here or we're in the same class and then I looked at her and he said this or she did that and it led to this. There's all this energy. That's a relationship that's healthy. If they go, I don't know, we were going to the same school together and we had the same class and, eventually got together, and that story tells me this is a couple that's already created a story of incompatibility. They've even modified their origin story. So you might want to reignite your origin story. Like, how do we meet? What were the beautiful parts about it? It's renewing, because one of the biggest challenges in relationship and in life is really this law of familiarity, if you want to jot it down. The law of familiarity simply says, if you are around anything enough, you'll eventually take it a little bit for granted.
Alex and Layla talk about this a lot in some of their videos, is when they worked 100% together, everything, they felt like roommates, brothers and sisters. The attraction wasn't there. But if they didn't see each other at all, then they also didn't feel comfortable being intimate because it wasn't that, they didn't have any kind of comfortability to it. So there's a navigation, there's a perfect center for each one of us, and it's not the same either. So find that center of the perfect amount of awareness and the perfect amount of closeness that you get to really keep those sparks going. So if you're having issues with that, look into that as a possible issue. You're too close, spending too much time together, or you're not spending enough time together.
You don't mean to, it's just human nature. It's like, not that they don't love you, it's not you don't love them, it's just, it gets familiar. And familiarity breeds contempt, as we've all heard, right? So what you got to do is stop the familiarity and find the newness. What's unique? What can we do? What can we create? Let's create a date night. Let's do something different. But if you understand these 5 elements, you can see where you are in the cycle and you can work your way back to where you really want to be. Now, I think what I'd like to do, how many find this useful? Is this useful for you? I'm just curious. Hope you find this useful. Awesome. Once I understood this, I was able to see where a couple was in the breakdown, and I could figure out where to turn it around. But I could also do it for myself in our own relationship. And so, again, write down, remind yourself, the secret is kill the monster while it's little, while it's a baby. Get it when it's still resistance. Get it when you're just starting to feel depolarized. Figure out what you're going to do to bring that back, and you won't go through this full self. If you find yourself on the story of incompatibility, it's time to say to yourself, what's bullshit about that story? Make yourself write it down. What's bullshit about this person is totally selfish? Because I want you to remember this. Please jot this down. The human brain is a distortion, deletion, and generalization device. Our brains distort, delete, and generalize. We talked about this a little bit in our last session when I was showing you how to find your center under stress and how you...
One of the ways that you'll see this, at least it showed up in my life, is there was something specific that I would take out of the cupboard, and I'd forget to put it back often enough, right? So if I take this thing out 15 different times, and I remember 10 times to put the other items back in afterwards, and 5 times I left it out, my wife would have said, the last 5 times you've done this, you've left it on the counter. And so it was a way to complain about something. It was a way to get me to understand. It annoyed her, so I understand that complaint, but I did that 15 times total, and just 5 times I didn't do it. How many of you can relate to some form of that going on? And to heal from that kind of discussion, you need to learn how to communicate, and you need to learn how to love her. She's not feeling safe. She's not feeling heard when you do stuff like that. But there's a way to come around from the backside and heal that conversation so she doesn't speak to you in that way, because I know that hurts when they cut you and they say, you're not doing this. And it's like, I am doing that. Or you feel like you are doing it. It hurts. And I know there's a roundabout for both of you guys to come together and agree on actually how to fix that situation. But that's just an example.
You can change the way you feel. What this means is your conscious mind can only process so many things at once. So it's a cognitive miser. It tries to generalize things, because if you have to think about everything to the final detail to get the answer, it generalizes, it distorts, it deletes. Now, here's what you need to understand. If you're really happy in life or in a relationship, to be really happy, you have to delete all the things you could be unhappy about. Does that make sense? You have to generalize the good things in a great way. To be miserable is really easy. All you got to do is delete all the good things in your life, all the good things your partner does. You have to generalize their behavior. You have to distort their behavior.
There's a reason why Tony Robbins is like one of the best motivational coaches out there. He really understands the human condition and what runs us deep down in our core. And it's one of the things that we talk about and go over on a weekly basis over at my community group. And if you're interested in joining that, it's the Sentinel Husband. We just launched this community, and if you want to get on the ground floor and become a foundational member, go and hit the link that's in the description here below. And I hope you have a fantastic day.